Hi students, welcome to the BYJU'S Hindu News Analysis for 20th of August 2018. So let's get started. So let's look into the first article. So the first article says Ganga stretches in Bengal unfit for bathing. Let's look into the context. So context here says a recent map which is published by the Central Pollution Control Board has revealed that water in nearly a dozen of major stretches of the Ganga in West Bengal is so polluted that it is even unfit for bathing. The development comes at a time when the center has claimed that Namami Gange project with a budget of 20,000 crore has achieved considerable success. So first point that we need to understand is from the prelims perspective. So let's focus on what is the Central Pollution Control Board. So the CPCB is a statutory organization. So the first question that can pop up in the prelims is it a statutory organization, autonomous organization, or what is it? So the first point from the prelims perspective is it is a statutory organization. It is coming under the Ministry of Environment and Forest. So it was established in 1974 under the Water Prevention and Control of the Pollution Act of 1971. The board is led by a chairman who is nominated by the central government. So the next question that comes up in the prelims is he nominated, is he elected, and how is it done? So it is nominated by the central government and not by the parliament or by anyone else, but it is nominated by the central government. So the CPCB is entrusted with the powers and the functions under the Air Prevention Control of Pollution Act of 1981. It provides technical services to the Ministry of Environment and Forest of the provisions of the Environment Protection Act of 1986. It coordinates the activities of the state boards by providing technical assistance and guidance to resolve disputes among them. It further says the agency also works with the industries and all levels of the government in a wide variety of voluntary population prevention programs and the energy conservation efforts. And it further says CPCB along with its counterpart, that is the state pollution control boards, are responsible for implementation of legislations relating to prevention and control of environmental pollution. What is the major objective of the CPCB? It is coordinating all the actions of all the governments, the center, the state, the district, and at the local administration to make sure all the legislations with respect to the control of pollution are actually taken care by this CPCB. So what this article says is that there was one of the proposals from the National Green Tribunal, and the National Green Tribunal has actually asked the CPCB to come up with a map, and this map is actually giving the information of where exactly, how exactly the water is used and what are the major problems with respect to the pollution. So when we look into the matter, what it says is apart from West Bengal, the water of the Ganga is also unfit for bathing in states such as Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. It further says the map further reveals that Uttarakhand remains the only exception, with 11 stretches of Ganga being fit for bathing along with Era town in Bihar. So when we look into how the river is moving, what we realize is that it starts here with Uttarakhand and it moves all the way towards West Bengal and it finally moves towards the Bay of Bengal. So what here it says is that all the pockets wherever Ganga travels, only place where we would be able to use it for water consumption as well as for bathing is the Uttarakhand area. So all that is marked in green is the Uttarakhand area, and the other region is one region in Uttar Pradesh and the other region is in Bihar. Only these pockets where River Ganga moves is the place where we would be able to consume water and use it for bathing, but rest of the places the pollution is so much that it cannot be used for bathing as well as for drinking water. And it further goes on to say why is that West Bengal has more pollution comparatively than other regions. When we look into what exactly is the geographical location, Ganga actually goes downstream like this. So because it is in the downstream pocket, West Bengal actually occupies the downstream area. That is the prime reason as to why it carries all the pollutants that as it moves from the upper regions to the lower regions, and the concentration of the pollutants happens at the lower stream, and the lower stream is in West Bengal. That is why there is major concentration of the pollutants in West Bengal. Apart from this, is there are certain sewage treatment plants. These sewage treatment plants that was supposed to be executed and supposed to be implemented in these regions are not implemented at a rigorous pace, and that is the prime reason as to why there is lot of pollutant concentration in the region of West Bengal. So when we look into the criteria, it says that it was based on the dissolved oxygen level. So it says the CPCB guidelines upon which the map is based states that water is unfit for bathing when the amount of fecal coliform bacteria, so it is on the basis of the fecal coliform bacteria which is foundly main in human, and it is also more than 2500 probable number per 100 ml. Apart from that, it is also considering dissolved oxygen is not more than 5 mg per liter, and biochemical oxygen demand is less than 3 mg per liter, and the pH level measurement of how acidic the water is between 6.5 to 8.5 meters. So on the basis of all these things, the CPCP came up with this report, and this report goes on to say clearly that the water consumption can happen only in certain pockets of Uttarakhand, and apart from these regions, none of the other regions is where the Ganga water cannot be consumed or it can be used for bathing. So major criteria, as we have already discussed, it is based on 4 criteria. One is on the coliform levels, the other one is the dissolved oxygen, then the biochemical oxygen demand, as well as the pH concentration that is there in the water. So this is all we will have to consider with this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article is with respect to the international relations, that is with respect to India as well as Bhutan's relationship. So in India's and Bhutan relationship, what we are considering here is with respect to 3 important parameters. India and Bhutan relations have evolved over a period of time. Then we will be considering what are the elections. Then we are considering about project, then that is with respect to the economical aspect. Then we are considering the hydroelectric project, and then finally we will be speaking about the China in question, and then we will be concluding with what is the way forward that India has to take. So starting off with, first we need to understand is what is the context. So the context here is that Bhutan is in the election season, and this election season happens to be the 10th year of democracy being established in Bhutan. That is why we will be looking in detail about this article. So first we will have to understand this, what are the different political parties within the region of Bhutan. So when we look into the different political parties, what we have is 5 regional registered political parties, that is Bhutan Khuan Nam Party, Druk Chirwang Sopa, Druk Namprang Sopa, Druk Numonsong Sopa, and People's Democratic Party, that is PDP. Currently the one which is in power is the People's Democratic Party, and this is led by Sharing Topke. So in this consideration, what we will be understanding what exactly is the current status. So when we consider the current status, it is headed by PM Sharing Topke. So he is also in the election canvassing mode. In the previous elections, he won almost 32 of the 47 seats, and whenever he is going on election canvassing, what he is relying on is the fact that there are certain accomplishments that his party has made. So what are the accomplishments that he has made? One is his party has led to a lot of growth in the construction factor as well as the tourism boom. So what this party is actually saying is that there are certain things that we have built up with time, and one is we have included a growth factor in the construction. So the construction industry has gone really well, so we are banking on the construction segment, and because it's also economy depends on the tourism factor, there has been increase in the tourism in over a period of time. So 2 important factors that it is said is that it has fueled the construction as well as the tourism boom in Bhutan. And it further says that the most important factor is with respect to the rupee as well as Nugal-Trom crisis. So there was a lot of crisis with respect to the balance of payments with respect to India as well as their local currency, that is Nugal-Trom. So kindly remember, Nugal-Trom is the local currency of Bhutan. So what they have actually done is they have stabilized this whole the fiscal balance that was happening. So the second most important aspect is there was a lot of crisis between India and Bhutan when it comes to economical relationship, that is the rupee and Nugal-Trom were in crisis. There was a lot of instability, and what he is actually propagating is that the stability has been brought in with respect to these aspects of economy. And the third thing that he goes on to say is there has been a lot of reforms with respect to the economy by lifting the import ban on the cars. So this has obviously lifted in giving a boost to the economy of Bhutan. But one of the most important critical part is that he is unable to actually address the national debt, which is majorly due to the hydropower loans. So we will be discussing about the hydropower loans very shortly. Then we would be able to understand what is the overall context of this hydropower. Now this is what the present Prime Minister Sering Topge is actually fielding on when it comes to the elections. So there is an opposition party. So the opposition party stand is that there is an important party called as Drukfing Sopa. So what they are saying is that the Prime Minister Sering Topge is pro-India, and because it's pro-India, what they are actually saying is that this can be a problem to the Bhutan. So what they are saying is that we will come up with certain policies, and this policy of Bhutan, that is the foreign policy, will be independent of India. So currently the Prime Minister is mostly dependent on India. He is getting all the other provisions or getting the number of conservations with respect to India. But what we will be doing is we will be coming up with a project, or we will be coming up with a policy or number of schemes which is not dependent on India, but it will be independent of India. So we are not going to rely on India, or we are not going to let China and India interfere at our internal politics. We will be something independent and not dependent on India, is what the opposition is banking. So this is how the political setup is. But what we will have to understand is the sensitivity behind what India has to do. So this is how the election is. So India currently has one of its favoring one, and that is the Sering Topge's party, that is the People's Democratic Party, is very close to India. But you never know what can politics have, what can democracy do. So there can be an opposition party. So India always have to maintain the balance. So what we will be understanding here is India has taken a number of steps with respect to India and Bhutan's relationship. One of the major important factors with respect to the infrastructural development in building of roads is Project Dantak. So what is Project Dantak? So Project Dantak is one of the important economical infrastructure program that is developed by Border or Roads Organization, which was raised in May 1961. It is headquartered at Simtoka near Thimphu under a chief engineer. So Project Dantak was constructed under GOI funding, that is Government of India is actually funding this whole project so that there is infrastructural development that is happening in Bhutan. Over 1500 kilometers of road through very difficult mountainous terrain in Bhutan. Likewise, under the Government of India funding, Government Dantak has built all major highways such as East Highway, Thimphu Philsonging Highway, and airfields at Paro and Yangpula, and airport terminal at Paro, a number of helipads, the India-Bhutan microwave link, Bhutan broadcasting station, India House complex, Chukka hydroelectricity complex, power substations, river training works, and several important buildings including the SAC Convention Center. And also Project Dantak is also constructing infrastructure works for the Tala hydroelectric power project, besides maintaining some important highways such as eastern and western ways and other important roads. So what we consider is Bhutan is one of the landlocked countries, and this landlocked country basically believes in the green GDP. So they do not want much of infrastructure or development. Basically they believed in the footpath roads, or what is called as the lower rung roads. The infrastructure was not all that developed, but what India is doing is it is providing all types of infrastructural development so that Bhutan also comes up higher in the echelons of the infrastructure development. So for that, what we have is a Project Dantak where India is assisting Bhutan to make sure that all its infrastructure when it comes to the road and development of its infrastructure is happening. But there is a problem. So what is the problem right now? What is happening is whenever we are doing something for the country, it should be held at a very smaller level. That is, it should not be the one where the number of things or the number of countries actually feel that their sensitivity is violated. Let's go back to Nepal. So during this period, what happened was India did help a lot, and India helped a lot, so much that no other country was able to establish so much when it comes to India and Nepal relationship. There was earthquake that had struck, and India immediately sent its forces, and India helped everywhere in all segments of recovery during disaster management. But what was the problem is India at times became very jingoistic. So there were people from India and there were media which was actually reporting in Nepal that India is only helping Nepal, there is no other country. There was lot of vibe and there was lot of positive extremism in reporting, but this was not taken easily by Nepal. The same thing is happening with respect to Bhutan as well. So when we realize what exactly is happening in Bhutan, what we realize is that India has constructed a lot of roads under project Dantak, and this has a number of road signs and markers, and these road signs and markers that are used in the construction has Indian tricolors. When we are constructing something in another country, okay that we are giving grants to them, okay that we are helping them out, but why have Indian tricolors in another country? We are helping them through the infrastructural development, but why have the signs and also the road maps or the guides and signs or the markers with Indian tricolors? So when we see Indian tricolors in another country, this is kind of disturbing to the social media as well as the people who are actually recognizing this. So the first point that we need to understand here is that the number of markers or the road sites are in Indian states, which should have been avoided in the first place. Why? The number of accounts in the social media, people are not happy with it. And at the same time, when we look into the number of other road posts, what it says is, it says Dantak welcomes you to Bhutan. So this is not once again right. Why is Dantak being used? Dantak is a project name that is being given by India, so why is the word Dantak used in a foreign country is the second question. And the third important point that it goes on to say is, some of the highways has an outlet like or crediting the government of India. Yes, we would have done something good for these countries, but why mention government of India in another country? This is the third point. So we are doing all types of health, we are providing them the infrastructure development, we are providing them the grants, but why is that the names of India, Dantak, why is that the government of India's name is used, and why is that the tricolors are used? These are something which are haunting the people. And apart from this, what is happening is, there are number of cases where the Minister for Public Workers had to step in and change the names in the number of areas as to why this name, which is Indian name, is actually placed in Bhutan. So in number of places it was actually painted out and then new name had to be written. So what these are number of aspects. And when it comes to 2013, what we had also done was, 2013 Manmohan Singh government was there, and when Manmohan Singh government was there, they actually cut cooking gas subsidy just before the 2013 elections. And also what is important is, when we look into how the regional dynamics or the regional politics is, Narendra Modi government is actually having a particular alignment towards one party. Let's say for example there is Awami League in Bangladesh, so he is close to Awami League, and then let's say in Sri Lanka he is against Rajpaksa government. So what Bhutan is also realizing is Modi's administration or Prime Minister Modi's government, is it close to the People's Democratic Party, and is it in opposition to all other opposition party? All these things are being looked at. So one of the major concerns that we will have to address is, yes, we are building the infrastructure, yes, we are making sure all these things that the infrastructural growth is being done is addressed, but why is India taking an important name on itself? It should be acknowledged, people, native people should acknowledge that India is doing, but why is India showing it in terms of it painting in its names or giving the names and then acknowledging the fact that India is actually giving a lot of grants to these countries? This should have been avoided is what this article says. And further, when we look into what is happening, the second most important point is the hydroelectricity projects. So let's try and understand some of the factual data. So what is important from the hydroelectric perspective is that the whole economy of Bhutan is actually standing on the hydroelectricity project. We know economy is in Bhutan does not rely on much of industrialization because they do not want to disturb the peace with the environment. They have a concept called as green GDP, so they do not have much of industrialization that is happening. So majorly what they are restricting themselves is to agriculture, which is the primary sector. They do not have the secondary sector or the tertiary sector for that matter. So they do not have the second industrial sector and the third services sector within their economy. So their economy is basically living on one hydropower is one sector, the other sector is the agriculture. So hydropower actually makes a very important for the Bhutanese economy, and it is at the core of the Bhutan's plan for self-reliance, which they had initiated way back in 1961 during the first 5-year plan. So this hydropower is the largest source of domestic revenue for Bhutan, and it is the largest exporter to India. And what is more important is that they are actually going through a lot of trade deficit with respect to India, and this is actually a major crisis in Bhutan. So what we will be understanding is right now what are the projects that are undertaken. So when we look into what are the various projects that are undertaken, India imports power from 336 megawatt of Chukpa project, which was commissioned in 1986, and 1020 megawatt of Tala project commissioned in 2006, both built with 60% grant from India, 60% loan. So what is important here is 60% Bhutan need not have to pay back, but 40% is loan, so they will have to pay back. And the next is the Mangdichu project. Unlike the Chukka and the Tala, it is built on 30% grant and 70% loan, making the cost of financing much more and hence pushing up the tariff rate. So the cost of financing for this project is more. Why? Because 70% is given as loans, so Bhutan has to repay back India the 70% of the loan. And the third one, it says 720 megawatts of Mangdishu project has clearly doubled in the past 2 years for construction. Both Punat Sangchu 1 and 2, each of 1200 megawatt, has trebled in cost and have been delayed more than 5 years over the original completion schedule. And it further says, as of 2017 July, Bhutan's debt to India for 3 major ongoing projects, that is Mangdichu, Punat Sangchu 1 and 2, is approximately 12,300 crores, which accounts for 77% of the country's total debt and 87% of its GDP. So what is the overall problem? So when we realize what is the overall problem, we did realize that the hydropower is the major component or the major background with respect to their economy. But what is happening with time is these projects that were supposed to be executed, the projects supposed to be, let's say for example there are 2-3 projects, and these projects were supposed to be initiated and they will have to be completed by, let's say for example, 2019 end. But what is happening is India is investing in these projects, but there is delay in the implementation, and as a result the execution is bad, and because the execution is bad, the overall final output that has to be resulted is not getting implemented. So what is happening is, with delay in the project execution, they are not able to implement the project and they are not able to export the energy to India, and because they are not able to export energy to India, they are not able to pay back India, and that is why they have a lot of trade deficit. And what is the most important point with respect to India-Bhutan relationship is this: Bhutan's hydroelectricity project is a major success in the entire South Asia. So it did, I mean India did try to work out the hydroelectricity project in Nepal, but it wasn't a successful one. But when it comes to the Bhutan, this has become a grand success because India has invested money, and this is the only country which has a lot of surplus, energy surplus, and this energy surplus that is generated because of hydroelectricity is also exported to other countries as well. So with respect to Nepal, this was not the case. India was actually expecting certain surplus, but at times it was not there. But when it comes to the Bhutan, there is a lot of energy surplus. This was being exported to Nepal, this was being exported to Bangladesh, this was also being exported to India. But what is the major problem here? The major problem right now is delay in the execution. So there was a particular time that India had to actually finish off the project, and once the project is finished off, they would be able to send the surplus of energy to other countries. But because the project is not completed, there is delay, and because there is delay, they are not able to export the energy, and because they are not able to export the energy, they are not able to repay back the loan. And at the same time, what is happening is India actually becoming a debt trap. What is the most important point is, we know how China actually functions. China actually believes in a fact of debt trap diplomacy. So what it basically does is, it gives a large amount of funding, and once the home country is not able to control or give back these loans, it takes care of that particular project where it has given loan. Let me take you back to Sri Lanka. So what exactly happened is the Hambantota port. So Hambantota port, there was a lot of funding that China actually gave to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was not able to repay back the loan to China. So what exactly China did? China took over the Hambantota port. So what is happening here is, is India actually wanting to put Bhutan in the same way due to the debt trap diplomacy. So what do I mean by it? India is giving funds to Bhutan, India is giving loans to Bhutan to produce hydroelectricity power. It is not able to generate enough hydroelectricity, so India will take up this whole hydroelectricity project is what is being doubted. So what India should currently do is, because of the delay and implementation, it should not be doing all these things. Further, what it should be doing is it should implement all these projects very fastly, and it should be able to gain the goodwill as well as trust of the people within that area. And apart from this, these are the two areas. One is the project Dantak, the other one is the hydroelectricity project. Apart from this, they should be also able to get the exports. So their economy is based on agriculture, so India should not have much of tariffs with respect to the agriculture on the imports that are taken from the Bhutan to India. So a number of other issues like the environmental issues, illegal wildlife trade, or the cross-border drug smuggling, all these areas should also be addressed. And the third important question is with respect to the China. So we did see with respect to Doklam this area, and Bhutan also claims this area, and there is one of the agreement according to 1998 that it will be the same way, that is status quo has to be retained. So in case there is any unilateral decision that has to be taken, that can be offended by the opposite party, is what this agreement is all about. At the same time, what is more important is Doklam issue is not important for Bhutan as a whole. It does not get much of the economic value for Bhutan as well, because China at the same time is ready to give other disputed areas more in larger in size and take up this small area, but Doklam is actually resisted by India. Why? Because it could be a possible threat to India at the chicken's neck. In case China actually takes over this particular region, then what would happen is, in case of future conflict or tussle between India and China, what can happen is it can completely disperse the entire chicken neck area, and whole of northeast area will be dissociated with respect to India. And that is why it is more important with respect to the northeast and India, and not with respect to the Bhutan. So what we will have to understand is, Bhutan has stood in times, and Bhutan has made sure that it is always standing with India in spite of all the pressures that China is able to put on Bhutan. Bhutan is always promising India that we are standing by you. So what should India also reciprocate is, it is always standing with us. So India also has to develop goodwill, and it has to make sure that all the hydroelectricity projects that are currently there are actually completed and fulfilled, and at the same time it has to take care of all the exports that Bhutan is planning to come up in terms of the hydroelectricity, and it should further distribute it to Bangladesh. So when we look into the conclusion, Bhutan will actually stir its external relationship with China by giving neither provocation nor the impression of getting into a bear hug of dependence with India. Both could jeopardize its autonomy. At the same time, India should reach to as many people as possible to address the issues that have been concerned in this particular case, and that is, India should address the issues of hydroelectricity. It should not be jingoistic when it comes to grants. It should not be putting up markers in the region of Bhutan. It should be acceptable to the people. Only then India has to reverberate program, is what this article all about. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article is about slum policies. So what is the context? So the context here says India is actually having a rapid urbanization which has been proceeding a space for decades, and in this growth factor, what is happening is there is a large scale slum development which is popping up every day in the cities, and this is basically due to cheap housing that has been provided in the slums. So why is the slums popping up every now and then? Because there is large scale urbanization, and when there is large scale urbanization, you need the housing facilities, and this area of slums that are located are actually providing the housing facilities, and these are provided at a very cheaper price. And because it is providing at a cheaper price, that is why it is acting as a springboard where all the people who are migrating from other regions obviously end up in this region of slums. So what is that this article is all speaking about? First, it speaks about the number of issues, and then how these issues have to be addressed. So one of the first thing that it speaks about is the definitional flaw. What it says is that the number of concrete figures with respect to how exactly a slum is, what is a slum, how many number of people are there, what is the infrastructure that is required, the whole is missing. So India must first get its act right as to get out what exactly is the figures that is required. So there is a legal fluid definition, and the legal pedanticism leads to the exclusion of the people. There are two surveys that we need to consider here. One is the 2011 census, which says that 65 million people actually live in the slums, and the next is the UN Habitat survey of 2014, which says that there are about 104 million people who are living in the slums. So both these surveys are actually conflicting in number. So what India should make sure first is have a clear cut standard definition. Define what a slum is, define what a infrastructural growth in the slum should be, who are the people who are there, because both these conflicting surveys are resulting in different paradigms. So in order to address this, India needs to make a proper survey, and it should identify which is the area that is slum, and the clear definition has to be given. And at the same time, the second point it goes on to say is, when we have the slum policies that we currently have in the local administration, it is currently focusing on the housing reallocation or in situ development of multi-story complexes, but it is not able to address the core or the backbone of the slum development. So what is the core or the backbone? So it is only looking at the outer screen or the outer expression of the slums, the manifestation of the slums, but the inner core, the backbone, is not being addressed. So what are the various inner cores or the backbone? One of the major problems is with respect to the depth. Over 70% of the families in the depth are actually in the debt. That is, when they actually have the earnings, they do have the earnings, and these earnings are much lesser than their expenditure. So even if they have a earning with for a particular month, what is happening is their expenses are sometimes crossing their earning, or even if they're having a saving, it is approximately less than 1000. First point is that these people have a lot of debt, and second thing is, in case of an health emergency, education or other things, then these people will not be having any savings whatsoever. And the third important point that we need to consider is, these people do not have any loans whatsoever. These people are educated, but at the same time they do not have any formal channels to actually become entrepreneurs or to start up an economical outfit. They're not getting any formal channels of economy, that is, there is no financing that is happening, and because there is no financing, they are not getting any borrowing, and even if they are getting borrowing, it is through the private money lenders, and this is happening at a very exorbitant price. So they are not able to escape from this debt pattern. So the major third problem is, where exactly is the money coming from? How is that they are borrowing the money? And even if they are borrowing money, it is from the private people, and these rates are at a very high level, and they are not able to move up the ladder because they are not able to get loans from the formal banking system. So that is the third point. And the fourth important point is the water and the electricity. So water and electricity is the most important and the basic amenities, and this is not being provided to all these regions that this slum is located. So what could this actually lead to? So these are the four broad problems or the backbone problems. So what could this actually lead to? So what is happening is, because of all this, people are not able to move to the other regions, they are not able to move the higher echelons of the economy. So what is being done is, these people are actually stuck to the same area, and on an average they are stuck in the same area for 21 years, and the government is not able to bring about a change or a revolution in this area of slum development. And at the same time, what this can further lead is that these people are not moving out of the slums, and even if they are moving out, they are moving into another slum. They are not moving to a new area or a posh area, but instead they are moving to a cheaper slums. So what is happening in this case is that there is further growth of the slums rather than the development of slums into a newer region. At the same time, what is also being considered is, as we have discussed, there are number of undergraduates and technical certificates, and even these people who are entering into job markets, they are being paid at a very less level, and because they are paying at a very lower level, which is as much as what their parents were actually getting, they are not able to change the profiles from the slums to the higher echelons of the economy. So these are basically the number of problems that the slums are facing. So what is the way forward? So when we look into what should be the way forward, one is, we need a policy with respect to a slum policy. So this slum policy should address what the issues are. So you cannot have one per formula, or you cannot have a one size fits approach. So what you need to identify is, each slum in an area is different. So identify a slum, make sure what exactly is the problem, and these problems will have to be pictured out, and then certain experiments and surveys have to be conducted, and based on the locality you will have to come up with a policy, rather than coming up with one uniform policy and pushing and making sure that this policy is applied to all. This cannot be worked out, but instead a local survey has to be done, and a meaningful survey and statistics have to be taken out, and an individual policy should be applied to this area or this local region is the first thing. And apart from this, what is also being considered is that there are a number of MLAs who are working in this area. They are providing the water, they are providing opportunities with respect to construction of roads and with respect to the title deeds, and providing them the regularized electricity. So what is the most important factor is these MLAs are actually providing all these terms, but the economic opportunities and employment will become the important factor, and this the government should take care. That is, the government should be providing them, more importantly, the economic opportunities and employment. So you need to have a unique policy for each local area. That's the first thing. And then apart from the construction of roads and housing, what the government should do is it should provide them the economic opportunities, it should provide them the employment opportunities. And the third important point is we need to make sure that there is welfare of slum across, or else this could lead to further urbanization and law and order issue, is what this article all about. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says, what does falling rupee mean for you? So in this article, what we need to consider is, we did discuss everything with respect to this article when it comes to take Turkey economic crisis and its impact, but here we'll be discussing the impact with respect to India. Rest of the article with respect to Turkey economic crisis has already been dealt with. Kindly look into the earlier CNAs. So what we will be discussing here is, why is the rupee falling and what is its impact on the Indian economy. So when we look into what are the major problems, what is happening in this case is there is strengthening of the dollar. It is not due to the weakness of the Indian economy as a whole. It is because the dollar is actually strengthened. The dollar is very stronger because of changes with respect to economy in the US, and that is why there is problems that is happening in the developing countries. So the depreciation is actually largely owed to the dollar strengthening rather than the any inherent weakness in the domestic unit. So when we compare the rupee to the other currencies of the other emerging markets, let's say for example Russia, Brazil, Argentina or China, India is doing well against all these things. So when it comes to the impact, first thing that we need to understand is with respect to the exports. So because the depreciation is increasing day by day, obviously this will result in the increase in the exports and then decrease in the imports. Why? Because it takes a lot of money to pay for the same quantum of imports and fewer dollars to buy the same thing or the quantity for the export. So the exports will be increasing in this case and the imports will become more. And one of the most important factor is with respect to exports, what is the most important factor we need to consider is, one is with respect to the IT software services, the other one is the pharma sector. So both these sectors will have a increase in the exports, and that is the most important point when it comes to this impact. And the next important point that we need to consider is with respect to the inflation. So what is happening with respect to inflation? Inflation will obviously increase. Why is inflation increasing? Because India relies mostly on the oil imports, and because oil imports happen, we will have to give more rupees, that is more dollars, and that is why we will have to spend more, and that is why import bill increases, and that is when the inflation increases. So inflation is increasing because of this depreciation. And the third important point is with respect to the GDP growth. So GDP growth can be said as something neutral. There is exports that is happening simultaneously while there are imports that are happening simultaneously. So because there are exports and imports both being weighed equally, it is leading to the neutrality. So there is no increase or there is no decrease. So as of now, as a whole, what we have is a neutral perspective. So in future we will be discussing in case there is any more exports or more imports. Based on that we will be analyzing once again, but as of now the current status is it's a neutral stand because there is equal amount of exports that are happening as much as the imports. And the last important point is what is the impact on the individual. So how is that you, me and all of us in the society will be facing it? One of the more important point is any person who is wanting to go to trips or abroad, those people will actually face a problem. So in case any person is actually going to trips outside, these people will have the issue. But if it is the inbound trip, that is if anyone is actually coming down to India, then it will be a drop in the prices. So there will be tourism people who can actually come down to India. And at the same time, what we will also do is we would be able to create more jobs with respect to the export sector. So because there will be more jobs, there will be more employment opportunities. This is what will happen with respect to the individual level. So this is all we will have to know with respect to impact of the economy with respect to depreciation of the rupee that has taken place. So next, US tech giants plan to fight India's data localization plans. So we recently had the Sri Krishna committee report, and this Sri Krishna committee report, one of the recommendations says that we need to have data localization within India. So all the data or the important information with respect to the Indian citizens should not be on the servers that are located outside the country, but instead they should have a data localization, that is the data and the information should be there within the domains of the country in the local region. So this was what has actually happened. So what is happening in this case is that the US trade groups and the number of companies like the Amazon, American Express and Microsoft have actually opposed this move to store data locally. Why is that they are actually opposing this move? What they are actually saying is that this can lead to a lot of problems. So one of the major problems that can happen is surveillance. So when we become a part of data localization, what can happen is the data can be used by the government, and the government can actually start looking at what we are doing, where we are investing, what exactly is happening, whom are we targeting. So the government will have the data with respect to all these parameters. So the government is in constant eyes and ears are watching it, and this can lead to a large scale surveillance which we do not want to pay heed to, and that is why we are opposing this move. So the first point that it says is it potentially makes government surveillance easier. That is the cause of worry, and that is why we are opposing this move. And the second important point that it goes on to say is this could lead to increasing demands from the government. So what is happening is let's go back to one of the important factors that we discussed recently, and that is the Cloud Act. So what was happening is, in case of an investigation, currently India has to go through a channel of government and United States of India government and then to the private entities. But in case all the local data is there within India, the government will keep asking the data even if it is not required when it comes to data or the information. This is kind of irritating for the companies because they'll have to keep giving critical and privacy information to the government, which they are opposing to, and that is the demands. So all the demands that the government puts across to the private sector currently has to go to the US government, but in case there is data localization, the private entities will have to give it directly to the government, and this is against a breach of the privacy which the private companies do not want to, because they do not want to lose the trust of their associates, and that is why they are reluctant to provide the demands of the government. That's the second part. And the third important point is they will have to set up data centers, and because they have to set up data centers, this will need a lot of infrastructure and this will need a lot of money. What this can lead to is the raising cost. So because they'll have to provide the infrastructure, they'll have to have the people, because they'll have to have give employment opportunities to number of people in order to take care of this data center. This can lead to increase in the cost. And the last and the most important point, what will happen is, now that already India has some issues with respect to United States of America when it comes to protectionism and its stance with respect to H1B, this can further increase the economic relationship in the already strained relations. So we have the India-US relationship. This can further go down because these technical companies can actually lobby the US government, and they can actually make sure that these things are avoided in India. So this is all we will have to understand with respect to this article. So moving on, let's look into the awareness articles. It says India will be back on 7.5% growth track this fiscal, page 13. CAT to widen to 2.5% of GDP of Modi's economists. This we have already discussed with respect to the Turkey issue. So this is all we will have to know. So kindly visit the BYJU'S CNA, look into the practice questions both pre as well as mains, answer all your questions with respect to these and put it on the comment section so that we can evaluate and give you the relevant feedback for the same. So this is it for today. Thank you so much. All the best.